Hello, hello, welcome to Shelf Defiance. I am your disembodied narrator. We are continuing on with chapter 32 of Jurgen, Sundry Devices of the Philistines. Last we left Jurgen, the Philistines had invaded Sidopolis, and now they're heading towards the forest. This is made available to us by the amazing people at Project Gutenberg. Appreciate all of the amazing work they do to ensure that we have access to public domain books. All right, so I don't know how this chapter is going to go. I'm not going to shout any of those out yet. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in and see what kind of craziness is about to happen now. Meanwhile, the people of the field had watched Sidopolis burn and had wondered what would befall them. They had not long to wonder, for next day the fields were occupied without any resistance by the inhabitants. The people of the field, said they, have never fought, and for them to begin now would be a very unheard of thing indeed. So the fields were captured by the Philistines, and Chorus and Jurgen and all the people of the field were judged summarily. They were declared to be obsolete illusions, whose who merited doom was to be relegated to limbo. To Jurgen this appeared unreasonable. For I am no illusion, he asserted. I am manifestly flesh and blood, and in addition, I am the High King of Livonia, and no less. Why, in disputing these facts, you contest circumstances that are so well known hereabouts as to rank among mathematical certainties, and that makes you look foolish, as I tell you, for your own good. This vexed the leaders of the Philistines, as it always vexes people to be told anything for their own good. We would have you know, said they, that we are not mathematicians, and that, moreover, we have no kings in Philistia, where all must do what seems to be expected of them, and have no other law. How then can you be the leaders of Philistia? Why, it is expected that women and priests should behave unaccountably. Therefore, all we who are women or priests do what we will in Philistia, and then and the men there obey us. And it is we, the priests of Philistia, who do not think you can possibly have any flesh and blood under your shirt, which we recognize to be a conventional figure of speech. It does not stand to reason, and certainly you could not ever prove such a thing by mathematics, and to say so is nonsense. But I can prove it by mathematics, quite irrefutably. I can prove anything you require of me by whatever means you may prefer, said Jurgen modestly, for the simple reason that I am a monstrous clever fellow. Then spoke the wise Queen Dolores, saying, I have studied mathematics. I will question this young man in my tent tonight, and in the morning I will report the truth as to his claims. Are you content to endure this interrogatory, my spruce young fellow who wear the shirt of a king? Interrogatory? Yeah, that's gonna mess with me. Jurgen looked full upon her. She was lovely as a hawk is lovely. And all of that Jurgen saw Jurgen approved. He assumed the rest to be in keeping, and deduced that Dolores was a fine woman. Madam and Queen, said Jurgen, I am content, and I can promise to deal fairly with you. Wow, having a hard time with English again today. So that evening, Jurgen was conducted into the purple tent of Queen Dolores of Philistia. It was quite dark there, and Jurgen went in alone, and wondering what would happen next. But this scented darkness he found of excellent augury, if only because it prevented his shadow from following him. Now, you who claim to be flesh and blood, and King of Livonia, too, said the voice of Queen Dolores, what is this nonsense you were talking about proving any such claims by mathematics? Well, but my mathematics, replied Jurgen, are Praxagorian. What do you mean, Praxagoras of Kos? No, what do you mean, Praxagoras of Kos? As if, scoffed Jurgen, anybody had ever heard of any other Praxagoras. But he, as I recall, belonged to the medical school of the Dogmatici, observed the wise Queen Dolores, and was particularly celebrated for his researches in anatomy. Was he then also a mathematician? The two are not incongruous, madame, as I would be delighted to demonstrate. Oh, nobody said that, for indeed it does seem to me I have heard of this Praxagorian system of mathematics, though, I confess, I have never studied it. Our school, madam, postulates, first of all, that since the science of mathematics is an abstract science, it is best inculcated by some concrete example, said the queen, but that sounds rather complicated. It occasionally leads to complications, Jurgen admitted, through a choice of wrong example, but the axiom is no less true. Come then and sit next to me on this couch if you can find it in the dark, and do explain to me what you mean. Why, madam, by a concrete example I mean one that is perceptible to any of the senses, as to sight or hearing or touch. Oh, oh, said the queen, now I perceive what you mean by a concrete example. And grasping this, I can understand that complications must, of course, arise from a choice of the wrong example. Well, then, madam, it is first necessary to implant in you, by the force of example, a lively sense of the peculiar character and virtues and properties of each of the numbers upon which is based the whole science of Praxagorian mathematics. For in order to convince you thoroughly, we must start far down at the beginning of all things. I see, said the queen, or rather, in this darkness I cannot see at all. But I perceive your point. Your opening interests me, and you may go on. Now, one, or the monad, said Jurgen, is the principle and the end of all. It reveals the sublime knot which binds together the chain of causes. It is the symbol of identity, of equality, of existence, of conservation, and of general harmony. And Jurgen emphasized these characteristics vigorously. In brief, one is a symbol of the union of things. It introduces that generating virtue which is the cause of all combinations, and consequently, one is a good principle. Ah, said Queen Dolores, I heartily admire a good principle, but what has become of your concrete example? It is ready for you, madame. There is but one Jurgen. Oh, I assure you, I am not yet convinced of that. Still, the audacity of your example will help me to remember, one, whether or not you prove to be really unique. Now, two, or the dyad, the origin of contrasts. Jurgen went on penetratingly to demonstrate that two was a symbol of diversity and of restlessness and of disorder, ending in collapse and separation, and was accordingly an evil principle. Thus was the life of every man made wretched by the struggle between his two components, his soul and his body. And thus was the rapture of expectant parents considerably abated by the advent of twins. 3. Or the triad, however, since everything was composed of three substances, contained the most sublime mysteries, which Jurgen duly communicated. We must remember, he pointed out, that Zeus carried a triple thunderbolt and Poseidon a trident, whereas Attis was guarded by a dog with three heads. This in addition to the omnipotent brothers themselves being a trio. Thus Jurgen continued to impart the Praxagorian significance of each digit separately, and by the queen was declaring his flow of wisdom was superhuman. Ah, but madam, not even the wisdom of a king is without limit. 8, I repeat then, is appropriately the number of the beatitudes, and 9, or the Aeneid, also being the multiple of 3, should be regarded as sacred. The queen attended docilely to his demonstration of the peculiar properties of 9, and when he had ended, she confessed that beyond doubt 9 should be regarded as miraculous, but she repudiated his analogies as to the muses, the lives of a cat, and how many tailors made a man. Rather, I shall remember always, she declared, that King Jurgen of Ebonia is a 9 days' wonder. Well, madam, said Jurgen with a sigh, now that we have reached 9, I regret to say we have exhausted the digits. Oh, what a pity, cried Queen Dolores. Nevertheless, I will concede the only illustration I disputed. There is but one Jurgen, and certainly this Praxagorian system of mathematics is a fascinating study. And promptly she commenced to plan Jurgen's return with her into Philistia, so that she might perfect herself in the higher branches of mathematics. For you must teach me calculus and geometry and all other sciences in which these digits are employed. We can arrange some compromise with the priests. That is always possible with the priests of Philistia. And indeed, the priests of Sesphra can be made to help anybody in anything. And as for your hamadryad, I will attend to her myself. But no, says Jurgen, I am ready enough in all conscience to compromise elsewhere, but to compound with the forces of Philistia is the one thing I cannot do. Do you mean that, King Jurgen? The queen was astounded. I mean it, my dear, as I mean nothing else. You are in many ways an admirable people, and you are in all ways a formidable people. So I admire, I dread, I avoid, and at the very last pitch I defy, for you are not my people, and willy-nilly my gorge rises against your laws, as equally insane and abhorrent. Mind you, though, I assert nothing. You may be right in attributing wisdom to these laws, and certainly I cannot go so far as to say you are wrong, but still, at the same time, this is the way I feel about it. So I, who compromise with everything else, can make no compromise with Philistia. No, my adored Dolores, it is not a virtue, rather it is an instinct with me, and I have no choice. Even Dolores, who was queen of all the Philistines, could perceive that this man spoke truthfully. I am sorry, says she, with real regret, for you could be much run, uh, after in Philistia. Yes, said Jurgen, as an instructor in mathematics. But no, King Jurgen, not only in mathematics, said Dolores reasonably. There is poetry, for instance. For they tell me you are a poet, and a great many of my people take poetry quite seriously, I believe. Of course, I do not have much time for reading myself, so you can be the poet laureate of Philistia or any salary you like, on any salary you like. And you can teach us all your ideas by writing beautiful poems about them, and you and I can be very happy together. Teach, teach! There speaks Philistia, and very temptingly too, through an adorable mouth that would bribe me with praise and fine food and soft days forever. It is a thing that happens rather often, though, and I can but repeat that art is not a branch of pedagogy. Really, I am heartily sorry, for apart from mathematics, I like you, King Jurgen, just as a person. I too am sorry, Dolores, for I confess to a weakness for the women of Philistia. Yeah, I feel like you have a weakness for women, just full stop. Certainly you have given me no cause to suspect you of any weakness in that quarter, observed Dolores. In the long while you have been alone with me, and have talked so wisely, and have reasoned so deeply. I am afraid that after tonight I shall find all other men more or less superficial. Hi ho, and I shall probably weep my eyes out tomorrow when you are relegated to limbo, for that is what the priests will do with you, King Jurgen, on one plea or another, if you do not conform to the laws of Philistia. And that one compromise I cannot make. But even now I have a plan wherewith to escape your priests, and failing that, I possess a cantrap to fall back upon in my hour of direst need. My private affairs are thus not yet in a hopeless or even in a dejected condition. This fact now urges me to observe that 10, or the decade, is the measure of all, since it contains all the numeric relations and harmonies. So they continued their study of mathematics until it was time for Jurgen to appear again before his judges. And in the morning Queen Dolores sent word to her priests that she was too sleepy to attend her council, but that the man was indisputably flesh and blood, amply deserved to be a king, and as a mathematician had not his peer. Now these points being settled, the judges conferred, and Jurgen was decreed a backslider into the ways of undesirable error. His judges were the priests of Veltino and Sesphra and Aegeus, who are the gods of Philistia. Then the priest of Aegeus put on his spectacles and consulted the canonical law, and declared that his change in the indictment necessitated a severance of Jurgen from the others in the infliction of punishment. For each, of course, must be relegated to the limbo of his fathers, as was foretold, in order that the prophecies may be fulfilled. Religion languishes when prophecies are not fulfilled. Now it appears that the forefathers of the flesh and blood prisoner were of a different faith from the progenitors of these obsolete illusions. and that his fathers foretold quite different things, and that their limbo was called hell. It is little you know, says Jurgen, of the religion of Eubonia. We have it written down in this great book, the priest of Veltino then told him, every word of it without blot or error. Then you will see that the king of Ebonia is the head of the church there and charges all the prophecies at will, and changes all the prophecies at will. Learned Galleys say so directly, and the judicious Stigonius were forced to agree with him, however unwillingly, as you will instantly discover by consulting the third section of his widely famous 19th chapter. Both Gallus and Stigonius were probably notorious heretics, says the priest of Aegeus. I believe that was settled once and for all at the Diet of Orthamar. Eh? Says Jurgen. He did not like this priest. Now I will wager, sirs, Jurgen continued a trifle patronizingly, that you gentlemen have not read Gallus or even Sigonius in the light of Vossler's commentaries, and that is why you underrate them. I at least have read every word that was ever written by any of these three, replied the priest of Cesfra, and with, as I need hardly say, the liveliest abhorrence. And this Gallus in particular, as I hasten to agree with my learned confrere, is a most notorious heretic. Oh, sir, said Jurgen, horrified, whatever are you telling me about Gallus? I tell you that I have been roused to indignation by his Historica de Bello Veneris. You surprise me still, shocked by his Pornobosca de Scalo. My apologies to the Italian language, that's as close as I'm gonna get. I can hardly believe it, even so you must grant, and horrified by his Libir de Immortalite Mentulic. Again, my apologies. Well, conceding, no, well, conceding you that earlier work, sir, yet at the same time, and have been disgusted by his de modo condi, but nonetheless, and have shuddered over the unspeakable enormities of his, oh no, Ertopegonian, of his Sinkadica, my apologies if those are swear words, and especially of his Epipedesis, yeah, these aren't real words, that most pestilential, I'm pretty sure that's a word, and abominable book, Quim sin horror nimpotes legre. Again, my apologies. Still, you cannot deny. And I've read also all the computations of his detestable Gallus as those of Zenchus, Aventinus, Laelis, Vincentus, Legala Thomas Gaminus, and 8 other admirable commentators. I sincerely hope those are not real people. You are very exact, sir, but, and that in short, I have read every book you can imagine, says the priest of Cesfra. The shoulders of Jurgen rose to his ears, and Jurgen silently flung out his hands, palms upward. For I perceive, says Jurgen to himself, that this realist is too circumstantial for me. Nonetheless, he invents his facts. It is by citing books which never existed that he publicly confutes the Gallus whom I invented privately, and that is not fair. Now there remains only one chance for Jurgen, but luckily that chance is sure. Why are you fumbling in your pocket? asks the old priest of Aegeus, fidgeting and peering. Aha! You may well ask, cried Jurgen. He unfolded the cantrap which had been given him by the master philologist, and which Jurgen had treasured against the time when more was needed than a glib tongue. Oh, most unrighteous judges, says Jurgen sternly, now hear and tremble. At the death of Adrian V, Pedro Giuliani, who stood by, who should be named John the 20th, was through an error in the reckoning elevated to the papal chair as John the 21st. Ha! And what have we to do with that? Inquired the priest of Beltino, who raised eyebrows. Why are you telling us of these irrelevant matters? Because I thought it would interest you, said Jurgen. It was a fact that appeared to me rather amusing, so I thought I would mention it. Then you have very queer ideas of amusement, they told him, and Jurgen perceived that either he had not employed his cantrap correctly, or else that its magic was unappreciated by the leaders of Philistia. Wow. Well, that was fun, other than all of those names and made up words that I could not even pronounce. That was quite lovely. Okay, so looks like Jurgen's on his way to Limbo. Doesn't seem super fun. So I guess in this context, what's a modern Philistine device? Maybe a mandatory team meeting exercise, terms of service agreement, since it's all just made up and random. And who is Cabell really making fun of here? I mean, is it specific to the early 20th century? American middle class 20th century? Just or is it just a timeless attack on boring people? Is he just upset that poets and dreamers were trapped in a so-called practical world? I'm trying to engage with public domain books a little bit more deeply, and I'm struggling with the language, with the content, the context, because I didn't live in that era, obviously. So I'm just trying to shout out questions to help me engage with it more deeply. That is the end of chapter 32. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.